Picture this. You're scrolling through Instagram, watching couples post their perfect moments whilst your own relationship feels like an exhausting performance. You find yourself wondering, when did love become about curating the right image rather than revealing who we truly are? Modern dating apps promise connection but deliver endless masks, each swipe another opportunity to hide behind carefully crafted personas. Here's what's truly shocking. 78% of people admit to presenting a false version of themselves in the early stages of dating, yet we wonder why relationships feel hollow and unsatisfying. Jung discovered something revolutionary about human connection. We can only love others to the degree that we've learned to accept our own hidden parts. This isn't another self-help platitude. This is psychological fact backed by decades of analytical research. The authentic self you're afraid to show is precisely what creates magnetic, lasting attraction. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your attempts to be perfect are sabotaging your chances of real intimacy, and how embracing your psychological shadows transforms you into someone irresistibly genuine. Most relationship advice tells you to just be yourself, without explaining what that actually means or why it's so terrifying. Jung's depth psychology reveals the uncomfortable truth. We've been conditioned to hide our authentic nature so thoroughly that we've forgotten what it looks like. The person you think you need to be to attract love is often the very barrier preventing it. Today's dating landscape resembles a psychological masquerade ball where everyone wears elaborate personas, desperately hoping someone will love the performance. Social media amplifies this tendency, creating what Jung would recognize as collective shadow projection. We present idealized versions whilst unconsciously rejecting the messy, complex reality of human nature. Women especially feel pressured to embody impossible contradictions, be mysterious but available, confident but not threatening, independent but still traditionally feminine. The swipe culture has reduced human complexity to split-second judgments based on curated images. This environment actively rewards superficial personas whilst punishing authentic vulnerability. Dating apps function like slot machines for the ego, intermittent reinforcement that keeps us addicted to external validation rather than developing genuine self-knowledge. Each match becomes another hit of dopamine, another temporary escape from the uncomfortable work of facing who we really are. Jung understood that beneath every persona lies what he called the shadow, all the parts of ourselves we've learned to hide because they don't fit social expectations. In romantic contexts, this creates a devastating paradox. The qualities that make us most lovable are often the ones we're most ashamed to reveal. Your quirky sense of humor, your intense emotions, your unconventional thoughts. These aren't flaws to manage, but treasures to integrate. The cost of maintaining these masks extends far beyond dating frustration. When you consistently present a false self, you develop what psychologists call imposter syndrome in relationships. Even when someone expresses interest, you can't truly receive their affection because you know they're responding to a performance, not to you. This creates chronic anxiety about being found out and an exhausting cycle of trying to maintain an unsustainable image. Modern relationships often collapse under the weight of accumulated deception, not malicious lies, but the persistent withholding of authentic self-expression. Partners fall in love with projections rather than people, creating unstable foundations that crumble when reality inevitably breaks through. The person who seemed perfect during the honeymoon phase suddenly feels like a stranger, triggering confusion and disappointment that could have been avoided through early authenticity. Consider how many relationships you've witnessed that seemed ideal from the outside, but imploded dramatically. Jung would argue this happens when two personas marry rather than two integrated individuals. Without genuine self-knowledge, we unconsciously seek partners who will maintain our illusions rather than challenge our growth. This creates stagnant relationships that feel safe, but ultimately unfulfilling. The digital age has made persona maintenance easier, but also more exhausting. Every interaction can be edited, filtered, and carefully considered before sending. This might seem advantageous, but it actually distances us further from spontaneous, authentic connection. We become so accustomed to controlling our image that unscripted intimacy feels terrifying and unmanageable. Jung discovered that authentic individuals possess what he termed psychological magnetism, a natural attractiveness that doesn't rely on external manipulation or performance. This magnetism emerges when someone has done the inner work of integrating their shadow aspects rather than projecting them onto others. Instead of seeking validation through relationships, they bring completeness that enhances rather than depletes their connections with others. Authenticity in romantic context doesn't mean sharing every thought or emotion without boundaries. Rather, it means developing honest self-awareness and the courage to show up as your genuine self, even when that feels vulnerable. When you stop performing for approval, you naturally attract people who appreciate your actual personality, rather than your carefully constructed image. The shadow work involved in this process requires examining why certain aspects of yourself feel unacceptable. Often, these rejected parts contain tremendous creative energy and uniqueness. The woman who hides her ambition because she fears seeming unfeminine is denying both herself and potential partners the gift of her full power. The person who suppresses their emotional depth to appear low maintenance is withholding their capacity for profound connection. Jung emphasized that integration, not elimination, is the goal of psychological development. This means acknowledging and consciously expressing previously hidden aspects of yourself, rather than trying to become someone entirely different. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness to overcome, but a strength to channel wisely. Your intensity isn't too much for the right person. It's exactly what will create the depth of connection you're seeking. Authentic individuals report experiencing different types of attraction in their relationships. Instead of anxious attachment based on fear of abandonment, they develop secure connections rooted in mutual respect and genuine compatibility. Their relationships tend to deepen over time, rather than losing excitement as the personas fade. This happens because authentic connection allows for continued discovery and growth, rather than the disappointment of unmet projections. The process of becoming authentic often involves disappointing people who preferred your persona, and this can initially feel like rejection. However, Jung understood this as necessary selection. By being genuinely yourself, you naturally attract individuals who appreciate your authentic nature, whilst repelling those who would require you to maintain exhausting pretenses. When you embrace psychological authenticity, your relationships become laboratories for continued growth rather than prisons of stagnant expectation. Conflicts become opportunities for deeper understanding rather than threats to carefully maintained images. This shift transforms the entire quality of your romantic experiences from performance anxiety to genuine intimacy. Every person carries what Jung called a relationship shadow, patterns of behavior and attraction that operate below conscious awareness but significantly impact romantic choices. These unconscious dynamics often drive us toward partners who recreate familiar emotional patterns, even when those patterns are ultimately destructive. Understanding your relationship shadow is crucial for breaking cycles of unfulfilling connections and attracting healthier dynamics. The relationship shadow often manifests as repetitive patterns that seem to happen to us, rather than choices we're actively making. You might consistently attract emotionally unavailable partners, find yourself in relationships where you give more than you receive, or discover that your relationships follow predictable scripts that end in familiar disappointments. These patterns aren't random bad luck, but unconscious psychological programming that can be identified and transformed. Social conditioning plays a significant role in shaping our relationship shadows. Women are often taught to prioritize others' needs over their own, creating shadows around healthy selfishness and boundary setting. This conditioning can manifest as attraction to partners who need fixing, or relationships where their own needs consistently come second. The shadow work involves recognizing these patterns and consciously choosing different responses. Jung observed that we often fall in love with people who carry qualities we've rejected in ourselves. The person who prides themselves on being rational might be irresistibly drawn to highly emotional partners. Someone who suppresses their ambition might be fascinated by driven, career-focused individuals. While opposites can create dynamic relationships, problems arise when these attractions are based on projection rather than genuine appreciation. The digital dating environment amplifies shadow projections by providing endless opportunities to project fantasies onto limited information. Dating profiles become blank canvases for our unconscious desires and unmet needs. We fall in love with potential rather than reality, creating relationships built on imagination rather than authentic connection with an actual person. Modern hookup culture often serves shadow functions by allowing expression of desires that feel too vulnerable for committed relationships. However, without conscious integration, these split-off aspects of sexuality and desire remain disconnected from emotional intimacy. Jung would argue that healthy relationships require integration of all aspects of human nature, including desires that might feel socially unacceptable. The shadow also contains positive qualities that have been rejected due to social conditioning. Many women have shadows around their power, intelligence, or sexual agency, because they've learned these qualities might threaten potential partners. Integrating these positive shadow aspects often dramatically improves the quality of attraction they experience, drawing partners who appreciate rather than fear their full capabilities. Jung believed that unconscious patterns would continue repeating until they were brought into conscious awareness and actively transformed. In romantic contexts, this means examining your relationship history for recurring themes rather than dismissing past connections as isolated incidents. These patterns often reveal core wounds and beliefs that unconsciously drive your romantic choices. The first step in pattern recognition involves honest examination of your relationship timeline without self-judgment or blame. Look for themes in the types of people you're attracted to, the roles you typically play in relationships, and the ways your connections typically end. Do you consistently choose partners who are emotionally distant? Do your relationships often involve power imbalances? Are you repeatedly disappointed when partners fail to meet expectations you never clearly communicated? Childhood experiences significantly shape adult relationship patterns, but not in the simplistic ways often portrayed in popular psychology. Jung understood that we don't simply repeat our parents' relationship, but rather unconsciously recreate emotional dynamics that feel familiar, even when they're painful. The daughter of an absent father might not seek absent men, but rather partners who trigger similar feelings of having to earn love through achievement or caretaking. Family systems create internal working models of how relationships function, and these models operate automatically unless consciously examined and updated. If your family expressed love through criticism and improvement suggestions, you might unconsciously interpret similar behavior from partners as care, rather than recognizing it as potentially harmful. These internal models can be updated, but only through conscious awareness and intentional practice of new responses. Breaking unconscious patterns requires developing what Jung called conscious suffering, the willingness to experience uncomfortable emotions and insights rather than immediately seeking relief through familiar but ultimately destructive relationship dynamics. This might mean sitting with loneliness rather than settling for unsuitable partners, or experiencing the anxiety of vulnerability rather than maintaining emotional distance. The process of pattern interruption often involves making different choices before you feel ready for them. If your pattern involves losing yourself in relationships, breaking this cycle might require maintaining friendships and interests, even when a new romantic connection feels all-consuming. If you typically avoid conflict, growth might require speaking up about your needs even when it feels terrifying. Pattern breaking also involves developing new responses to familiar triggers. When you notice yourself falling into old relationship roles, you can consciously choose different behaviors. Instead of immediately accommodating a partner's preferences, you might pause and consider your own desires. Rather than assuming rejection when someone needs space, you might practice respecting boundaries without personalizing them. Jung recognized that authentic feminine energy possesses natural magnetism that doesn't require manipulation or strategy to attract suitable partners. However, Modern dating culture often encourages women to suppress or distort their feminine nature in attempts to appear more appealing or less threatening. This creates internal conflict and attracts partners who prefer performance over authenticity. The integrated feminine encompasses both traditional nurturing qualities and aspects that might challenge conventional expectations. Fierce protectiveness, intuitive wisdom, creative power, and emotional depth. Women who embrace their full feminine spectrum report experiencing different types of romantic interest, less desperate pursuit, and more respectful courtship from individuals who appreciate rather than fear feminine complexity. Modern feminism sometimes creates confusion about feminine authenticity by suggesting that traditionally feminine qualities are weakness rather than recognizing them as one aspect of a complete personality. Jung understood that psychological health requires integration of both masculine and feminine aspects, regardless of gender. For women, this often means embracing both their capacity for nurturing and their need for independence and achievement. The authentic feminine is not about following prescribed roles, but about expressing your genuine nature without apology or modification to accommodate others' comfort levels. This might mean showing your emotional intensity in a culture that rewards emotional numbness, or expressing your intellect in environments that prefer women to be decorative rather than substantive. Authentic expression naturally repels incompatible partners, whilst attracting those who appreciate your genuine nature. Dating advice often encourages women to strategically withhold aspects of themselves. Don't appear too interested. Don't be too available. Don't seem too intelligent or successful. Jung would recognize this as shadow creation, splitting off natural impulses and responses to manipulate outcomes. This strategy might occasionally produce short-term results, but ultimately prevents the deep connections most women actually desire. The divine feminine archetype includes aspects that modern culture often pathologizes: intuition over pure logic, emotional wisdom, cyclical rather than linear thinking, and connection to natural rhythms. Women who honor these aspects of their nature often find themselves naturally attractive to partners who appreciate these qualities, rather than seeking to suppress or control them. Authentic feminine energy also includes healthy boundaries and self-protection instincts. The truly feminine woman doesn't endlessly accommodate others' needs while neglecting her own, but rather creates containers for healthy relationship dynamics. She can be nurturing without being self-sacrificing, receptive without being passive, and loving without being desperate for approval. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming your complete, authentic self, transforms the entire purpose and experience of romantic relationships. Instead of seeking partners to complete missing aspects of yourself, you approach relationships as opportunities for two whole individuals to create something greater than either could achieve alone. This shift from neediness to wholeness fundamentally changes the quality of attraction you both generate and experience. The individuation process in romantic contexts involves identifying and integrating aspects of yourself that you've previously sought in others. If you've always been attracted to highly social partners because you consider yourself introverted, integration might involve developing your own social confidence rather than relying on partners to fulfill this function. This doesn't mean becoming extroverted, but rather accepting and expressing your authentic social style. Integrated individuals approach dating with curiosity rather than desperation. They're interested in discovering whether someone is compatible with their authentic self, rather than trying to determine how to modify themselves to increase their appeal. This fundamental shift in approach naturally attracts more suitable partners, whilst eliminating time wasted on incompatible connections. The shadow integration process often temporarily disrupts existing relationships, because partners who were attracted to your persona might feel confused or threatened by your authentic expression. This is a natural part of the process and ultimately serves both individuals by revealing whether the connection was based on genuine compatibility or mutual projection. Relationships that survive this transition typically become stronger and more satisfying. Jung observed that individuals who complete significant shadow work often experience what feels like a complete transformation in their romantic lives. Previous patterns of attraction simply stop occurring because the internal dynamics that drove them have been resolved. They might find themselves interested in completely different types of people, or approaching familiar types from positions of strength rather than neediness. The integrated person can appreciate others' qualities without needing to possess or control them. They can admire a partner's achievements without feeling threatened, support their growth without fearing abandonment, and maintain their own interests and friendships without guilt or jealousy. This creates space for authentic intimacy, rather than the anxious attachment patterns that characterize many modern relationships. Relationship conflicts become opportunities for continued growth, rather than threats to be avoided or managed through manipulation. When both partners are committed to authenticity and growth, disagreements can deepen understanding and intimacy rather than creating distance. This requires emotional maturity and commitment to truth over comfort, but the results justify the effort. When you've done the deep work of psychological integration, you develop what Jung called psychological magnetism, a natural attractiveness that doesn't require external validation or manipulation to maintain. This magnetism emerges from self-acceptance, authentic expression, and the confidence that comes from knowing and embracing your complete nature. People are naturally drawn to individuals who possess this quality because it's so rare in our culture of performance and pretense. Psychological wholeness creates abundance mentality in relationships. Instead of approaching dating from scarcity and fear, you interact with potential partners from a place of curiosity and choice. This energy is immediately recognizable and attractive because it signals that you're not seeking completion through others, but rather offering the gift of connection with someone who is already complete within themselves. The integrated individual radiates what Jung called authentic presence, the quality of being fully inhabiting your own life rather than performing for others' approval. This presence creates space for others to be authentic as well, which is deeply attractive to people who are tired of surface-level connections and performative relationships. Which of these relationship patterns most resonates with your own experience? Are you ready to embrace the transformative power of authenticity in your romantic life?